If I could have your attention, please, we're going to move to the next race, which is Secretary of State. And the moderator will be Deborah DeCuster, who is a correspondent for Kansas City Hispanic News. Deborah?
Good evening. I'd like to welcome here Scott Morgan, who is running for Secretary of State, and Samantha Potter, who is here representing current Secretary of State, Chris Kobach. And so we will start with opening remarks. You will have 3 minutes each on opening remarks. My first question, you will have 5 minutes to answer the first question, and then 1:30 on the next questions, and then at the end, 2 minutes for closing remarks. So we will begin with opening remarks, and Samantha will start.
Hi, everyone. Secretary Kobach apologizes for not being able to make it tonight. The schedule's a little busy with the primary being on Tuesday. I'm going to speak about why I support Secretary Kobach more than necessarily speaking on his behalf. Let me go ahead and start off. I'm the child of immigrants. Both of my parents came over here in 1973. My dad became a citizen when I was 11 years old. My mom still hasn't become a citizen but has her green card. So protecting the vote in the state of Kansas by proving voter ID and having proof of citizenship requirements is very near and dear to my heart personally, because even though I know my mom would vote the same way that I would vote, I still wouldn't want her to vote because being a citizen is an honor. And I also know how easy it would be for somebody like my mother to go in and just check the box saying she is a citizen when in fact they aren't a citizen. That's one of Secretary Kobach's biggest accomplishments since taking office is the SAFE Act and requiring proof of citizenship and voter ID to vote at the polls. Additionally, Secretary Kobach has improved the business services aspect of the Secretary of State's office. He has made it easier for you to file your annual reports online. He's currently working alongside the governor's office to make it a one-stop shop, which takes a lot of work, so he plans on getting it done if he wins re-election. So basically his goal is for the revenue, the department, and Secretary of State's department and several other departments to have this one-stop shop. So you go in and you log in only one time and you can do your taxes, you can do your annual reports, you can do anything that you need for businesses. And additionally, I was raised in small businesses. My parents started a restaurant when I was 9 years old, so I know how difficult it can be for somebody to file all of that. So I know how nice it is now that he is able, or anybody would be able to go in and file that. Additionally, Secretary Kobach has reduced the size of the agency by 14%. He's very pro-small government, and he has also returned $20 million to the state general fund and cut the expenditures by 11% in the Secretary of State's office. So, thank you.
Okay, now we will have opening remarks from Scott Morgan.
Thank you. And first off, thank you everybody for coming here tonight. I really appreciate it. I know there are many things that you can do with your time, and I think it's impressive whenever anybody takes the time to come out and actually hear who's running for these offices. I am Scott Morgan. I'm running as a Republican for Secretary of State against Mr. Kobach. And who am I and why am I doing that? Well, one thing I'm excited that I've not been able to say as I've crossed the state is I'm finally back to where I was born. And I will admit, that was 1957, and I only spent 5 days at the old Providence Hospital, but that's where I was born. And then I was whisked across to Shawnee, where my dad was a reporter for the Kansas City Star, and I shared a bedroom with my 3 sisters, where I still have a great respect and fear for women because of that. I graduated from KU, undergrad and law school, went out and worked in Washington for Senators Kassebaum, then Senator Dole. I represented the United States Senate on the Federal Election Commission, and then I was chief counsel for Senator Dole's presidential campaign in 1988. After that went under, my wife and I were expecting our first child, so we moved back to Lawrence, and I was chief counsel for Governor Mike Hayden. And in 1990, I was the Republican nominee for Congress. That did not work out at all, and so I decided it was time to try the private side. So my wife and I started a business. We started a small publishing business on state and city statistics. It was an odd business, but it gave us some flexibility. I spent 2 terms on the Lawrence School Board. I live in Lawrence now still. And we raised our 3 children. We took them to all 50 states, and 48 of them were in a minivan, so in addition to women, I fear children. But it was an experience that made me very grounded. And in 2007, we were fortunate enough to sell the business to Congressional Quarterly. I continue to edit a few publications. That's who I am. Why am I doing this? Well, I think that background makes me uniquely qualified for this odd job. Most people have no idea what Secretary of State is. It is largely a clerical position, but it is an important position, and the reason we continue to elect it is the Chief Elections Officer. And I believe that right to vote is so fundamental and so dear to all of us that I get very nervous when the government starts telling me that we need to limit it to protect it. So I don't support the new requirements for citizenship paper requirements to register. I think those go against the grain of what it means to be Kansans. For 150 years, we have had good, clean elections. I do not accept that the voter fraud has produced the kind of problems that we need. We now have 19,000 Kansans who have done everything that I did under penalty of law. They said that they were citizens, but that's not good enough, because we're so afraid of illegal immigrants oddly deciding that they're going to come into a government agency and register to vote and go and vote in Kansas elections. We can't get Kansans to vote in Kansas elections. I'm not sure why illegal immigrants are going to do that. So I want to make sure that we protect that right to vote, and I think that's what the discussion is about tonight. Thank you again for coming out.
Okay, with the first question, I'm just going to remind you, you will have 5 minutes to answer. And this question will go to both of you, and we will start with Samantha first. The Secretary of State office is described as the least complicated, most accessible agency in state government. The office is to provide the people of Kansas with efficient, responsible, and responsive service. Do you think that is happening now? And what changes do you think need to be made?
Yes, it is happening now. We did a study, I guess, I don't know exactly what the term was for it, but we basically screened all of the calls in the office to see how long it would take for Business Services Department to answer questions for everybody. And 85% of the time, the question was answered within 5 minutes. 97% of the time, it was answered within 10 minutes. So we're very efficient when it comes to answering people's questions and getting problems solved. Additionally, the elections office is superb when it comes to this. And everybody that's in charge of the main offices, like the Assistant Secretary of State for the Elections Office and for the Business Services Office, have both been working for the state Secretary of State's office for almost 30 years in the Business Services Department, and I believe 25 years in the Elections Department. So they know those offices inside out and out. They know exactly how to answer the questions and get the problem solved. I think to improve it is the one-stop shop for business services in the state of Kansas, because that is what makes it Kansas what it is. I mean, the small businesses in Kansas are what are important to the livelihood of Kansans. So going in and being able to do everything in one spot instead of anything else, like going to all the multiple places, is going to be so much easier. And whether Secretary Kobach's reelected or not, I hope that whoever does become elected does that, because it's going to make it easy for businesses in Kansas. Additionally, I know that we are working on other things to make it more people-friendly. For example, we just had an app come out today. So you can download the app as Vote Kansas at the, for an iPhone or an iPad, and you can enter your name, see your district, who's running in your district, and get questions answered that way. We try to be as people-friendly and efficient as possible, and I believe that we are succeeding on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we will go to Scott for the question.
One of there are 2 sides to this office, as we've mentioned. There's this clerical side and the elections. And this side, the clerical side, is what typically makes people's eyes glaze over, but really is the critical part of, in many ways, of what that office needs to do. And one of the frustrating things I've had, as a business person, a small one, who's not paying an accountant or an attorney to do it, I did have to do the filings. You had the ones you had to do with the Secretary of State, the ones you did with Revenue, the ones that you did with Labor, not even talking about the ones that you would do with the feds. And it would have been great, once they went online, to have had a portal, a center, one site where you could go in, so I didn't have to remember a PIN number for everyone, what website they were, all the different timings. When Mr. Kobach announced for re-election, one of his accomplishments was that he had proposed this portal. But after 4 years, and he would blame other agencies, the governor's offices or whatever other agencies were involved, it still hadn't been accomplished. My point is, this mundane side is what he needs to spend more of his time on. I think the Secretary of State is a full-time position. It's paid $86,000 a year. He makes tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees representing anti-immigrant groups around the state, around the country, in Arizona, Nebraska, Texas, Pennsylvania, Alabama. And he says he does that on his own time. My argument is it is a full-time professional job that demands your full-time professional energies, so that things like the web portal aren't an accomplishment because you proposed it, but are an accomplishment because it exists. And I think it is that kind of policy or kind of priorities that you have to have. And I get that he might not want to do it. He's very smart. He has lots of things he wants to do. He has great ambition. I'm just saying this job demands your full-time professional experience. And so I really do want to focus on that. I hear from attorneys across the country or across the state who are frustrated in their dealings with this office because of the difficulties that they have. They've lost a lot. The way he has made cuts in it is when people retire or quit, he doesn't replace them. In business, you've got to make a much more strategic decision as to where you make cuts if you have to make cuts. And you make sure that you have the people that you need. You can't just say, I'm not going to raise, I'm not going to raise, I'm not going to raise, and just as people leave, you lower the staff. That's a recipe for disaster. I'm all for efficiencies. Believe me, I pay taxes. But you've got to have the right people in place so that those services, the ones that make everybody else's eyes glaze over, are being done so that we can move on, and that makes our economy much more vibrant. So I really, oddly, get excited about that side of the office.
Thank you. Okay, now we have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer the next question. I will start with Samantha. If a Secretary of State Kobach is reelected, what are his plans to get people to register to vote or to encourage new voters out there, people that are turning of age, to get them to sign up to vote, to be a registered voter?
Well, I can't necessarily speak on that part for Secretary Kobach, but I can tell you from my experience, when I was 17 years old, before my birthday's in October, so I was right before the November election, and I went to register to vote that summer at a voting drive, and I registered as a Republican, and they threw my registration away. And because it was so important to me, because I saw my dad go through the citizenship, becoming a citizen and becoming naturalized, I knew how important it was for me to vote, so I double-checked on it and realized, luckily with 3 weeks to go, that I hadn't been registered to vote, so I had to go and re-register to vote. And I think when it comes down to it, if you want to vote, you're going to vote. If you don't want to vote, you're not going to vote. And I think that, yes, we can make it easier for people to register to vote, and we're trying to, especially with proving citizenship. If you're born in the state of Kansas, we're cross-checking with vital statistics, so we have your birth certificate on record. And we are checking that and making sure that it's there. It takes about 2 weeks for us to get it because we do run the check once a month. But if you're born in Kansas, you don't have to prove your citizenship because we have it there for you. We're trying to work with other states to be able to get that information for other people as well. I know it's not the easiest thing, but we're really trying to make it as easy as possible to prove your citizenship and vote in the state of Kansas.
Thank you. And then we will ask the same question of Scott.
This is the fundamental reason that I'm running, is trying to encourage people to vote. I think the office has become far too partisan. I think that, yes, we were elected as Republicans or Democrats, but everyone in Kansas needs to have the sense of trust that who's ever in this office is going to treat them fairly, whether they're Republican or Democrat, socialist, libertarian, whatever label they want to lay on themselves. That's not this office's job. This office's job is to encourage people to vote, to make it easier for people to vote, to go out and reach out and realize not all of us are dealing with the same amount of resources, the same amount of skills. it is hard for a lot of people to register. My daughter, who has a lot of things going for her, tried to register online. She entered the information. She tried to upload. She has a passport, her picture of her passport. I watched her do it. She gets a rejection letter a week later saying she didn't submit anything. They have such a clunky system that even with those who are trying to submit or to comply with it, it doesn't work. She then gets it straightened, it gets found, and she's now registered. How many people, 18-year-olds, are going to just say the heck with that and walk away? This right is so basic of a foundation to everything else that we hold dear that we start playing with it at our own expense. And I think the fear we have is not of those who threaten us by illegal aliens voting. It is by Americans and Kansans who don't vote because they find it too difficult and too confusing. And I want to reach out to people across the state. I want it to spread the gospel of voting.
Thank you. Okay, my next question, we'll start with Samantha again. Should individuals wanting to vote have to show proof of citizenship? And then what effect has the voter ID laws in Kansas had on voters as they go to the polls?
Well, the proof of citizenship and the voter ID law are the same law, but they're separate issues. Voter ID has actually, I believe, 22 people or somewhere around there actually didn't show up to the polls without their ID in 2012. And I believe all of them came back with their ID to vote. So it's not the voter ID issue that has any issues, but because also you can get a free ID in the city of Kansas if you're using it to vote. Also, the proof of citizenship law, yes, I believe that you should prove your citizenship to vote in the state of Kansas. And like I said, we are trying to make it as easy as possible for Kansans to vote, and those who voted or were born in Kansas don't have to prove their citizenship. I believe it's extremely important because it's your right and your duty of being a United States citizen to vote. So I believe providing proof of citizenship and voter ID are important. Yes, we do currently have about 19,000 people on suspense, is what it's called. You're still registered. Your process is still going through. You're just not completely registered. We're not throwing that registration away and making you re-register. All you have to do is provide your citizenship. So it's not you're suspended. It's not that you've been thrown out. You're still in our system. So you just have to come in to the office, email it in, text it in, depending on which county you're in, to get that on file for you.
And before I throw this question to Scott, I wanted to ask a follow-up question to you about what causes people to get on that suspension list.
Many things. If you're 17 and not 18, you're on suspense. If you're a felon, you're on suspense until that is taken off. Anything really, anything that if you don't check the boxes correctly on your proof of, or on your registration form, you're on suspense until you go and recheck, like, yes, I am a United States citizen. That was even before proving citizenship was put into place. So many things can put you on that suspense list. So not every single voter on that list is just because of the proof of citizenship.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So now Scott can answer the original question. Do you need me to repeat it? Or?
Well, that's all right. I'll wing it.
Okay.
I'll just make something up. Yeah, there are two issues there. The voter ID is where you have to show your typically driver's license when you go in to vote. That's fairly popular with people. Most people think that's not a big deal. It wasn't 20, and I'm not trying to bring you out. That's right. I just know this because Mr. Kobach said it yesterday on radio, but it was over 800 of them were turned away and had provisional ballots because they didn't have IDs. This isn't counting all the people who just turned around and said, oh, I don't have my ID, and said, forget it. That, to me, is 800 too many that we don't need because I don't have proof that there were people trying to impersonate other people. It's something I want to look at, see what kind of other IDs we can accept, and see what we can do to make it easier. The far bigger issue to me is the proof of citizenship. I think that has caused enormous problems. There's now, I was told today, has grown to 24,000 are on this list, and I don't know what it means other than the fact they're disenfranchised and can't vote. You're not on some list, and it's no big deal to be on a list in suspense. You just haven't been accepted yet to be able to vote, and I think that is a fatal flaw in the system. When you were worried about, he points out over 15 years, 235 people that may have had some sort of allegations of fraud from 97 to 2012. And now we have 24,000 Kansans, at least 19,000, who just can't vote. And those to me, out of 10 million, you have 235 over 15 out of 10 million people who voted. You now have 24,000 Kansans sitting here right now who can't vote because of these laws. That to me is a far bigger problem. Am I done? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It has been said in some online sites that the Secretary of State office is being viewed as a stepping stone now to a higher political office. Is that true, do you think? Is that something that the current Secretary of State is looking to do, to move into another office spot? Or is this type of job something that you should just focus on and just stay in that and serve your term? And Samantha can start because I see she's ready.
I cannot speak for Secretary Kobach whether he's going to run for a higher office someday, but I know that he was asked to, even this election, and he said no because this voting issue is so important to him. And that's the reason why he is in the office, is to secure Kansas elections. If he's going to run it for something, that'd be great. I mean, I'd like to work for him doing that, but it's not in his immediate sights right now. His immediate sights are on the office because that's what is important to him. So,
All right, thank you. And now we will turn it over to Scott.
I do not have ambition. There may have been a time when I had ambition, but at 57 and after my kids and my business, that was all beaten out of me. So I am actually excited about being Secretary of State. That is a job I would relish. It gets me excited to go around to. I was out in Garden City 3 or 4 days ago and meeting with recent Americans out there from the Burmese community, the Guatemalan community, the Somalian community, and communities, in fact, I'm not even sure where they were, but they were Americans, and they were nervous about voting. And I thought, what an exciting thing to get them into the system. When my family moved here in 1856, they weren't Americans, but they became Americans. And I think that it is a great process. So this office is one that I really look forward to doing. I don't hold anything against people using it for advancement, but I hope they use it for advancement by putting their full energies into it and succeeding at it, so that then people think they might warrant moving on. And I fear too much that Mr. Kobach spends so much time around the country and on Fox News proclaiming all the things that he does that have nothing to do with Secretary of State. And that's what I have problems with when he uses it as a stepping stone for that kind of building up his image. If he does it by focusing on the job, so much the better. I'm not planning on moving on. This is a final job for me.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. And now we will have, as Bridget gets ready, the closing remarks, and you have 2 minutes. All right, so we will start with Samantha.
okay. Secretary Kobach has worked very hard for to get the SAFE Act passed through. He believes in proof of citizenship. He believes in showing your ID to vote. He wants to make it easier for businesses in the state of Kansas. He works very hard, over 40 hours a week in the office because I see him. And he isn't out of state like everybody assumes he is. He's been out of state twice since I started working for him. So, I mean, he's not gallivanting across the United States working on these other issues. But this job is very precious to him. He really believes in everything that he's doing, and he really loves what he's doing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have ran for it in the first place. If elections weren't important to him, why would he have ran for Secretary of State to begin with? But if you don't believe in everything that Secretary Kobach believes in, it is your right to vote for somebody else, and he actually asks you to, because he wants, no matter who you are, to be strong in your views. And that's one thing I absolutely love about our race, actually, is it hasn't gotten dirty. Like, I see all of the other political races, and I mean, Scott Morgan is a really nice guy. Gene Schroeder has been extremely nice and pleasant as well. I really am enjoying this race because we aren't going after each other, we're just going after the issues. So if you believe in everything that Secretary Kobach is standing for, please do vote for him. If not, go ahead, vote for Scott Morgan. He is a great guy, too, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much, and I thank you, Samantha. Those were kind words, and I really respect that she's had to put up with me a lot at a lot of these forums around the state. I'm sure that's more fun things to do. If I were her, were young, I would certainly not want to do it. So she's done an admirable job. I appreciate that. I also really want to thank you guys again for coming out. It is an honor to be here. I have so enjoyed going around the state, but it is nice to be back in this neck of the woods and being around lots of different people. This state has so much going for it, and sometimes I think we spend way too much time being afraid. And we get scared, and whether it's from the left or the right, we just sit there and we start letting the fears overtake us, and we start asking, well, we need more protection, more rules. And I look around and I see what my son just graduated from the Air Force Academy, and I watched him stand up with 1,000 others, just all kinds of Americans, and pledge to uphold our Constitution and protect it with their lives if necessary. And the thought that we should in any way look at this next generation as anything but glorious. And I feel that we just sit there and we try to squash them instead of going out and saying, you need to be part of this system. We were given a great blessing and we want to pass it on to you, and we want you to vote. You need to vote. Whatever your political views are, and as a Republican, I want to compete for those new voters. I don't want to be afraid of them. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of a lot of things, but mostly I'm just so blessed to be in this state, to be with these people and with my family. And whatever happens, I'm going to be really happy because I got a great life. It's not without its tribulations, but it's with a lot of glory. So I'm Scott Morgan. I'm running for Secretary of State. I'd love to have your vote, but mostly, please, please vote. That's our sacred duty. Thank you.
Thank you.